We now go into the final day of the season. Manchester City have got another game still to go between now and then. And there's only a point between these teams at the moment. So here we know. Liverpool qualify as champions. They'll be going through to the Champions League. Arsenal's win today means they are in the Champions League. Newcastle, because of the goal difference, they win, they're in. Same with Chelsea. Aston Villa need to win and they need to hope that someone else drops points. Manchester City, if they win their remaining games, they're pretty much in. Nottingham Forest need to beat Chelsea and hope that someone else slips up. So 3 in, 2 out. Predict.
Well, you look at that. Chelsea are fourth at the moment. If they get beat by Nottingham Forest, they're back in the Europa Conference. Well, they'll be in the Europa if they win, but they could end up 7th in the league. Mm. Do you know what I mean? I think I'd have to go with Newcastle safe, and I only say that because Everton have got not a lot to play for. So I am going to go. My worry is Man City. Mm-hmm. I really do. The last 2 games, they've failed to score in the last 2. They got Bournemouth coming up.
And then Fulham at Fulham.
Yeah, but Bournemouth's a dangerous game. You know, if they don't get anything out of this Bournemouth game, this is the one they need to get a point out. Because if they get a point out of this, it's back in their hands again. If they lose, it's out of their hands. And that's all you can ask for on the last day of the season, is for it to be in your hands. And at the moment, it's only in Newcastle, Chelsea's and Man City's hands as we talk.
And Bournemouth came here a few weeks ago and won. They're an excellent side, and it's not exactly going to be party time at Manchester City after losing the FA Cup yesterday. So they're going to have to create the atmosphere themselves, the players. It won't be easy. Of course, what's at stake? They'll want that top 5 place because they want Champions League football. But they're 2 tough games. Fulham won again today. They're going to want to finish as high as possible. Anything could happen. I think Chelsea got the toughest game. I think Chelsea to go to Nottingham Forest, that's really difficult one. If they can get 3 points there, and obviously you're giving yourself Champions League football, and it's going to be tight, Liz. I think anything can still happen.
You're all thinking Newcastle, definitely.
I think at home, the last day of the season at home, you'd expect them to beat Everton because Everton got nothing to play for. They can't even move up a place
or drop.
And they've had all the celebration of Goodison Park today, and that was a big. Manchester City, 4 points from Bournemouth and Fulham. You're nervy about them, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah, I'm very.
Les?
I'm nervy.
I think they'll do it. You know, like I said, going in and it's in your own hands. And this City, we know they can produce when they want. I know things haven't been great for them this season, but they can turn up when they need to.
Bournemouth,
they're tough, really good side.
Was the cup final a little bit of a concern for you for City? Because as Les said, we've said this a lot this season, City can play brilliantly when they turn up.
Yeah.
And yet when there was silverware on the table, and they started the game really well, but they didn't deliver.
Well, if they'd have won the FA Cup this year, we'd have probably said those 2 games are going to take care of themselves, but it just affects your confidence a little bit. It'll be Kevin De Bruyne's last home game. He's going to want to go out on a high and produce a big performance. I still think they'll do it, but I don't think it's going to be easy by any stretch. If you look at the one fixture, the team with the easiest fixture, I would say is probably Aston Villa, because they've got Manchester United away. I mean, in terms of none of us know what's going to happen on Wednesday night. That's going to be an crazy game.
If that wishing well works, I know what's going to happen.
So lots to play for here, and I still think anything is possible. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if this is what we're in a great sort of Sundays on Sky Sports.
This is a masterclass of ducking the question, really.
Because these aren't teams that are banging forward. We're not normally normally we're talking about Manchester City last day of the season going to win the title. We're talking now about them trying to get into the top 5. That just shows you how far they've dropped. So anything can still happen. Give us something that we
can make you look really silly with in a week's time.
Kelly, just look back at last year. Every season. But no, I think Manchester City getting there. You know, I think Chelsea have got the toughest fixture. They're the team that I worry about the most, just going to Nottingham Forest. And that result today has given them real belief and hope. But even then, even if they win, it still doesn't mean they're guaranteed to get into the Champions League.
So not as a 100% prediction, but you think more than likely Newcastle will beat Everton. They'll get the win that they need. It's likely that Manchester City will get the 4 points that they need, which you're less confident about. We've got 2 versus 1 in that sense. Villa with the game against Manchester United. Do you think that with Manchester United having that big Europa League final against Spurs in Bilbao in midweek, does that mean that Villa are likely to get the victory against Manchester United?
I would go without that. Even without that game, I'd go Villa to win that game. But that's what the other teams do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not in their hands.
Yeah,
They can win
just
it.
say, but you think Villa win.
I
Villa
think
get the
Villa
win that they
I think
need.
Villa win.
You can show me that graphic another 100 times and I'm going to change my mind 100 times. It's very, very difficult.
Don't worry, as long as we've got it clipped up, we're good.
Newcastle at home, we look at it, and what Everton haven't got
Yeah.
a great deal to play for. That was an amazing day for them. It was their last day at Goodison Park. So they're going to go to Newcastle next week with no pressure. They're just going to be out of play. If they were to score early, first minute, anything can still happen. We all go, this is what should happen, and they're great teams. They've got the best players. Pressure does funny things to teams and players and individuals, coaches. So there's still a lot, and anxiety is going to be in those stadiums.
And if Villa win or are winning in that game, and it's a draw between Chelsea and Forest, both of those could miss out on Champions League football. Do you think that seems like a realistic possibility, that Villa win and Chelsea and Forest draw?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I think if you said before the game, that's a hard game to call. You know, I've seen it too many times over the season. You know, I've seen Man City turn up to win the league and be 2-0 down. You know,
Aston Villa,
you know, and against get beat by QPR. You know, I've seen it in Holland this year already.
Yeah,
I've seen it in
Ajax.
Holland. I see it yesterday with Strasbourg, last kick of the game. It happens. You know, you just don't turn up on the last day of the season. These are professional footballers. You know, they're playing in front of 50, 60,000. No one wants to get beat. No one wants to lie down and get embarrassed. You know, something will happen, and they'll be nervous. All these players. I like it in my hands. You know, all you can ask on the last day of the season is to be in your hands. And I think that's, you know, long as Man City get at least a draw against Fulham, it's in their hands again.
And what will
If they beat Bournemouth.
Yeah. And
Well, no,
if they draw. So if they get the draw against Bournemouth, then
if they lose to Bournemouth, it's out of their hands. You know what? They could win their last game and not go in. So they've got to at least not lose this football match.
And what will play a big part as well is the fact now, obviously everyone's got their phones, everyone knows the score. That anxiety transmits to the players. The crowd start to get a bit more anxious because things aren't going well. You hear a massive cheer. And sometimes the information isn't always correct.
Sometimes the opposition fans like to start a rumour.
Exactly. So it's going to be a very exciting, quite a traumatic end of season for a lot of teams.
So the only one you're agreed on is Newcastle so far.
Yeah, I think
that's it, isn't it?
Yeah,
and the rest of it, I don't know. Any two from the rest of them.
Well, you were saying you were worried about Newcastle, but you just think because Everton can't move anywhere.
Yeah, I just think because Everton can't move anywhere.
Yeah.
I just think Newcastle and Newcastle are good at home. They're decent at home. Do you know what I mean? You know, they're a good football team, and you know if they play like they did in the first half today, I think that'll be enough.
Yeah. Europa League final then. Quick word. Spurs against Manchester United. If you think that was hard to predict, talk to me about two teams who, on paper, by any metric, have had poor seasons.
I think you've been kind with the word poor.
They're right down only just above the relegation places of teams who've had desperately poor seasons, which is why they're... And the winner of that game, either Tottenham or Manchester United, after those seasons in the league, will be playing Champions League football next season. Who is it going to be?
I think Man United.
Because
you don't like Tottenham.
I think Kulusevski's a massive miss.
I agree.
I think if Kulusevski's playing, I'm probably going with Tottenham, but I think he's by far their best player, and I think it'll be a big miss. And I just think Man United have that little bit extra than they do, in my opinion. But it could go anyway.
Kulusevski, Maddison, Bergvall are really important players. So you'll probably end up with a midfield three of Bentancur, Sarr and Bissouma. So in terms of someone that's going to have that little bit of extra quality, it's going to be more difficult. But with Son, Solanke, they can win this game. Of course, we can talk about. And Roy Keane made a very valid point. I totally get it that Manchester United's history can carry you through, but there isn't anything when you've watched Manchester United and to work on that basis and go, because that's going to change anything. It's going to be anything can happen. It's going to be one of the great pillar fights.
And even when they've had difficult seasons, Manchester United have managed to come home with a piece of silverware. But Les, are you Team Spurs for this one?
Of course, all day long. I've had this all day, from last night, and I'm really desperate for them not to win it.
You said you're buying a Bruno shirt.
I'm going sports shop.
Make the case briefly for Tottenham.
No, I just think they've been poor in the league this season, but I think in this competition they've turned up and they've been at their best when they have turned up. So I think with Bissouma and start of the season and Bentancur, they were good in that midfield. So I'm of course going for Spurs.
Tottenham have got one out. They've beat them the last 3 times, haven't they?
Yeah, and they have got a big performance.
Yeah, they've got good. Yeah.